This is Digital Marketing Depot, broadcasting live. I'm Karen Burka, your webinar producer. Thank you for joining us today for Getting Started with Responsive Search Ads. We are very pleased to welcome Sylvanus Bent, Product Manager at Google, and Wes McLaughlin, Senior Vice President of Marketing for Marin Software. Now, before I turn the webinar over to our speakers, I want to tell all of you a couple of things. If you need some help or have a question for our speakers, just use the Q&A box, and we will do our best to help you. If you want to tell a friend, check out our sponsor, Marin Software, or Digital Marketing Depot. There are some widgets at the bottom of your screen. Just click on them, and they will take you where you want to go. Remember that you can customize your audience console to move or resize any windows that you have open. Now, we are going to hear a lot of great content today, so I wanted to let you know we are recording this broadcast, and we will make it available for viewing on demand this afternoon. I'll send an email out when it's ready. So, with that business taken care of, let me make some more formal introductions. Sylvanus Bent works closely with design and engineering colleagues to ensure that Google is building the right products for its customers. He embraces a growth mindset and looks forward to continuing to learn everything he can about successfully taking products to market. Wes McLaughlin has over a decade of experience developing and delivering analytical enterprise SaaS applications, including 4 years with Applied Predictive Technologies, working on the company's platform to help retailers maximize the return on their promotional spending. Now, audience, you can see more complete bios and contact information for our speakers on the left side of your console. Remember, if you have questions for our industry experts, please make good use of that Q&A box. I'll get to as many of those questions live after the formal presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Sylvanus to get us started. Sylvanus, there's your first slide.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. My name is Sylvanus, and I'll kick things off by giving you an overview of responsive search ads. So let me set some context about why we created responsive search ads. So to start with, there are billions of searches that happen every day on Google. Also, the amount of traffic coming from wide mobile devices has doubled in the past 2 years. And in addition to all the devices, we see that different ads appeal to different consumers in different contexts. And by context, we mean things such as the consumer intent or the keywords, location, audience groups, and more. So to help you keep pace with increasing consumer expectations and the proliferation of device sizes, we needed to rethink how ads are created. So this is the essential question we asked ourselves. How can we help advertisers create relevant ads that perform with less effort? And that's why we created responsive search ads. Responsive search ads they are intended to simplify the ad creation and testing process. Powered by Google's machine learning, these ads mix, match, and optimize your headlines and descriptions to show multiple combinations with a single ad. This kind of scale makes it easy for you to show the best, most relevant ad when people search for your products or services. Now, Google's machine learning assembles your content into ads that both look good and perform well using a variety of signals, such as keyword and device. Adding a responsive search ad to your ad group can improve that ad group performance by up to 15% more clicks or conversions. And also I wanted to call out, as of yesterday, we made responsive search ads widely available in 10 more languages. You can see those languages here, and we've also posted it on our website. Now let's talk a little bit more about the product and some of the key features for responsive search ads. So to start with, you can provide Google with up to 15 headlines and 4 descriptions. Then in any given ad, we'll select up to 3 of those headlines and 2 descriptions to show in different combinations in different order. Now, the reason we ask for so many headlines and descriptions is because the more content you give us, the more combinations our machine learning is able to assemble. And this means that you'll be more relevant to more queries, and that makes it more likely your customers will see a relevant and useful ad. Now, I wanted to talk about one control feature we've added, something called pinning. Now, normally when you create a responsive search ad, those, as I mentioned, the headlines and descriptions can appear in any order. However, we know that some of you need to have more control over the content of your ads. So that's why we created this feature called pinning. Pinning allows you to pin a specific headline or description to a specific position, and it just makes your ads more consistent in the way that they appear. So for example, on the left-hand side screenshot, that same-day flower delivery is pinned to position 1, which means that all of the ads that are shown will have that headline in the very first position. Now, one note we like to just make about pinning is it does inhibit machine learning, which can reduce the number of good combinations that can match to a search, and that can impact performance. We have a few different examples of pinning on this screen. We wanted to note in the middle example, if you do need to pin, you can actually pin multiple headlines to the same position, and the same with descriptions. And what that does is it gives the system options over which headline to use in that given position that you've pinned to. So now I want to talk about some of the features that are available now and some that are coming near term. And these are features designed to give you more assistance in creating and managing your responsive search ads. So in the Google Ads interface, when you create a responsive search ad, we're starting to show suggestions for headlines and descriptions that come from your landing page or other content in your account. We also developed something called ad strength, and this is meant to measure the diversity and relevance of the different combinations the machine learning system can assemble based on the content that you've provided. Now this updates in real time in the creation flow to give you feedback as you're creating your ad and giving you advice on what you can do to improve. And finally, we also show what we call a smart preview. This is showing real combinations that machine learning is assembling on the fly as you're creating and entering new content. So we also show that ad strength as a column in the reporting so that you can view it and prioritize which of the ads you want to work on or improve. At the ad level, which is this view, you'll have all the same stats as you do for existing text ads, all the same stat columns you can view today. Now, we're also working on something called the asset level report. For each asset, we will show the impressions so that you can have a sense of which assets are being used how often. And in addition to that, we're showing something called the performance column. And this performance column is basically designed to group your assets into learning, low, good, and best. So it's designed to give you a rough sense of which assets are performing better than others relative to, in this one existing responsive search ad. In addition, we're trying to be transparent, and so we created something called the combination report. And this shows which ads your customers have actually seen. So we show every ad that's been shown and how many times it's been shown, showing the impressions. And this combination report is specifically designed to be transparent. So now I wanted to give you a few tips on creating responsive search ads. I think the first is focus on your headlines. You know, the first thing that your customers will read. So make sure to provide good headlines that really get your brand across, but also diverse content. The second is it's important to be sure to include your keywords in at least some of your headlines. It doesn't need to be in every single headline, but you want to have several of your headlines relevant to your keywords. And sometimes people can also use keyword insertion. The other thing is provide as many unique assets as you can. Again, the more headlines and descriptions you enter, the more combinations that can be assembled from the machine learning system. And finally, I really wanted to just mention it's important to reuse the existing content that's worked in your text ads today. The same good content will work, so be sure to add it to your responsive search ads as well. So to help you get started with responsive search ads, we created a recommendation. This recommendation basically takes your existing headlines and descriptions from the text ads in your ad group and packages it together to create a responsive search ad. You can, of course, edit, download this, but the whole idea is to help you get started in a more scalable way. Go to the recommendations and see what the responsive search ads based on your existing content looks like. And finally, we also just launched this new recommendation, and it's actually encouraging you to reuse that existing content in responsive search ads that have already been created. So you might see this at the top of your ads tab. And what it's looking for is if you have a responsive search ad in an ad group that also has existing text ads, if you have headlines and descriptions that are missing, this recommendation chooses the ones that are best and encourages you to add those to your existing responsive search ad. And the reason we're recommending this is in our analysis, we've seen that our responsive search ads that contain both the good headlines and descriptions from their existing text ads plus new content can perform better. It's almost up to 10% more clicks or conversions for that responsive search ad. And with that, I'll actually hand things back over to Karen.
Thanks so much, Sylvanus. That was some great information. And so, audience, we have a question for you before we move on to Wes McLaughlin from Marin, because this is all very new for a lot of us. So we wanted to find out from our attendees today if you are currently using RSAs in your paid search campaign already. All right, so this is a single response. We want you to choose one of the following. Yes, you're using RSAs today. Not yet, maybe, but you are planning to next year, maybe put some budget aside for it. Or no, there's no plans to implement RSAs yet, and you're just here to kind of learn, gather some information, maybe for your marketing team. So think about your response on that. I want to remind everyone that Sylvanus and Wes will be available to take your live Q&A questions. So we are getting quite a few questions in already, so get yours in if you have one so that we will try to have time to answer as many as we can. And also for everyone to remember that the webinar will be available on demand later today. So in case you want to go back over some of the great information that we are sharing today, you can do that at your leisure. Excuse me. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at the results. And Sylvanus is going to take a look at them with me, and we're also going to bring Wes McLaughlin in from Marin to take a look and see. So yes, we've got a very savvy audience here. Nearly half are already using RSAs, and another 45 or 46% are planning to next year. So Sylvanus, that's good news for Google. Are you surprised that so many people have jumped on the bandwagon already, or is this what you expected?
You know, this is actually what I expect. Internally, we've seen pretty good adoption, and it's picking up pretty fast. I also think it really shows kind of Google's investment in machine learning products. We've recently launched on the display side responsive display ads, and we also have things like universal app campaigns. So, for search, this is basically our first big foray into more machine learning in the core ad type. So I think this is great to see, and excited that, one, that a lot of the audience is already using responsive search ads, and that a large portion is planning to in 2019.
Yeah, Wes, are you seeing this at Marin already as well? Clients starting to use them or asking lots of questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of people who are getting started and dipping their toe in, but most of our clients, and I think this is probably represented by the 46% who haven't started yet, are looking to their 2019 planning and trying to figure out how they're going to migrate to RSAs and take advantage of this new ad format. And that's exactly what we're trying to communicate here on this webinar today is what are the next steps. And I'll get into that a little bit in my section.
Great. Well, let's get you started right there, and there's your first slide.
Absolutely. Thanks, Karen. So this is Wes McLagan from Marin Software. We are a platform that helps advertisers get the most out of their search, social, and e-commerce advertising. You can think of us as a tool that helps you amplify the effort that you put into Google. And what we want to do is provide a little perspective on what we think of RSAs and how you can get the most out of them. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about is, what are the pros and cons? As we look at this new ad format, why should I look at it? Is it going to help me out? And what do I need to be aware of when I'm looking to implement it? I think first and foremost, the biggest value proposition, the reason to use RSAs is that first one there, which is better results. In our initial clients testing, it's been a range of results that we've seen, but we do believe that over time, RSAs will offer better results than your standard text ads because of the power that machine learning brings to it. And I'll get into this a little bit more in a couple of slides, but that's really the opportunity is how do I get incremental lift from my programs? Also, this is going to be less work over time. There's a little bit of a migration that will be involved, but I think this is going to be easier than managing, dozens of individual ads, constantly doing testing. It's a new world with the power of machine learning, and it delivers a degree of personalization that just wasn't possible before. And included in this less work is, if you want to test out new messages, it's going to be easy to drop those in as new headlines or new descriptions within an RSA in a way that will let the data speak for itself and determine whether that new messaging is something that's resonating with your audience or not. There's a couple things that we do need to get over when we think about migrating to RSAs. The first is loss of controls. There's no way around it. Machine learning is a bit of a black box. So you're going to give the Lego pieces of your ads, the headlines and the descriptions, and Google's going to assemble them on the fly to the customer. And so there's a little element of having a bit less control. Sylvanus talked about pinning that will help you preserve some of that, but there is less control than in the standard text ad world. There's also going to be a migration here, and we'll get into how to handle this, but there is going to be some work in order to get from where we are today in a pre-RSA world to fully take advantage of that, and that's something that you'll have to get over. And then the reporting on the individual elements of the RSAs, can be a little bit limited relative to what advertisers might be looking for. Sylvanus talked about some of the improvements that are coming in his section, and I think those will really help. And I'm sure there'll be more additional improvements over the course of 2019. But probably the biggest obstacle for most advertisers is just the fact that this is change. This is a new way of thinking, a new way of advertising, and change is inherently scary. And the way we look at this is really the dawn of a new day in search advertising. We believe that the majority of search ads, text ads, will be running through RSA by the end of 2019. So this is definitely the way of the future, and it's something that all advertisers should and will need to have to figure out how to embrace. This is a continuation of a trend that's been going on for a while. Sylvanus talked about some of the ad formats that are taking advantage of Google's machine learning, but this mindset shift to the old way of having ad formats and doing A/B testing is something that's been going on for a little while now. This article was written about a year ago where Google tried to explain why A/B testing no longer was relevant. And the big mind shift that advertisers need to make is that there isn't a winning creative in a given ad group. And this is because we can deliver ads that are relevant to that user's query, a specific user's query, and a specific user's context that may be more or less meaningful. And so there isn't one ad that's right for everybody at every time. And so in the early days, you would turn on creative rotation, or last year when this was written, I should say, you would turn on creative rotation, give Google a few different ads, and let them figure out which was right for the given user and the given query and their context. RSAs are just taking that one step further. Rather than only letting them work with individual ads, you can do that with the components of the ads. And by giving it, over a dozen headlines to work with, you can give the machines a lot of opportunity to drive really personalized ads that are going to resonate with your user. And that's something that just wasn't possible with traditional search ads. Initially, RSAs had an advantage because they actually were bigger. They had a third headline where normal text ads didn't. Well, with the expanded text ad improvements that have recently come out, that advantage has gone away. But these new, more personalized ads are going to be competing with traditional text ads for the near future. And so advertisers who are able to deliver those more relevant personalized ads are going to be able to outperform the competition, and we'll see better click-through rates, show up higher on the page, all of the benefits that come from better performance. So where are we on this road? We just saw the poll question showing that 10% don't have any plans to use it at this point, 46% haven't tried it yet. If we look across our client base, and the numbers from Google are in the same ballpark, we see that less than 10% of ad spend is running through RSAs today. And that's not surprising. The ad format is just getting rolled out broadly. But this is something that's going to be a big agenda item for 2019 for advertisers. And we think there's a big opportunity here. It's the beginning of the road, so don't get scared if you think you're behind. But this should be an important part of your 2019 plans to make this migration. So what I want to do is talk about a few specific tips for taking advantage of RSAs and getting the most out of this. I'll talk a little bit about getting started. We'll talk about the importance of variety in RSAs, and I'll show you some specific examples of why that matters. Savannah talked about pinning. Let's talk about some best practices there, and then finally some additional tips for thinking about how to optimize your RSAs. So first, on getting started, I think at the risk of getting sued by Nike for appropriating their tagline, really it's just do it. You need to go out and put a few of these ads into your campaigns. Savannah's talked about the recommendations tab, which is one easy way to get started. So when you are in the search ads application, you've got a recommendations link on the upper left, and it brings up the ads that Google is suggesting RSAs to add to your ad groups. This is the same view you saw earlier, but down below is an actual example of this is for Marin Software, some of the headlines that Google was recommending. These are extracted from our account, and they're trying to make it as relevant as possible to the ad group and the campaign into which it was being added. One thing that you can see here is the kind of range of different messages that Google is suggesting. And this is an important part of getting started, is making sure that you're giving it a lot to work with, because you don't want to say, Marin Software 12 different ways, because if I do, that ad's going to look really weird. Google isn't going to be able to put those together. You need to think about these components being put together as building blocks and into a cohesive message that will read across the top of the ad. If you're going to not use recommendations, if you're going to do this on your own, you want to think about focusing on some higher volume ad groups. There's two reasons to do that. The first is that you want to make sure that you're able to move the needle with these RSAs. So if you're focused on very small ad groups, you're really not going to see an impact from a change. The second is you need to give machine learning enough data to work with. If you work with a very low volume ad group, there's just not going to be enough ad impressions to where they're really going to be able to test and understand which message works best with which users. So focus on identifying a few higher volume groups, adding an RSA to it, and see how that works. Now, when you're selecting your groups, there's one other thing to think about, and that's to think across your account. You can think about it in terms of stages of the funnel. You've got your broader category terms at the top. You maybe have brand terms down at the bottom. Make sure that you're testing at different stages of the funnel, because you may have different approaches or different results depending on where the users are in the funnel. Make sure you've got your ad groups set to auto-rotate so that if you keep your text ads in there, the RSA and the text ads will be rotating through and you can compare the performance of each of those two types of ad groups. And if RSA performance is superior, as we expect it to be, you would see that RSA starting to get more and more of the traffic, and it will gradually crowd out the text ads with that more highly personalized ad format. When you're thinking about the headlines to use, make sure you're putting headlines in that are both with and without the keywords that people are searching. And I put keywords in there because there's two ways to do this. There's keyword insertion, so putting the keyword in curly brackets so that Google's dynamically inserting the query text into the ad. But then there's also static headlines that are using the same concepts, the same type of keywords. You want to make sure that those show up in your ads, but you also want to give it that variety to work with. And then go ahead and compare the performance. Take a look at how these RSAs are performing relative to the text ads, and from there you'll go on to tweak those ads, and we'll get a little bit into optimization in a couple of slides. So let's talk about variety. The importance of variety. You want the machine learning tools to be able to go in and really try different directions and different messages for different audiences. As we talked about earlier with the death of A/B testing, there's not one message that works. People are going to respond very differently to different approaches. An example might be if you've got somebody who's a more frugal person. They're looking for discounts or savings or low prices. If you have somebody who's more focused on luxury, they may be looking for slightly different messaging, and those low price or discount messages may turn them off. Well, if you give in an RSA, if you have different types of messaging, you're going to be able to let the Google take its understanding of those users and what's going to appeal to them and create the relevant personalized ad. So first and foremost, make sure that you've got enough assets in there to work with. A guideline is, you can put up to 15 headlines in an ad group, but make sure you're getting at least 8 to 10 in there. And some things to consider here that you may want to, dimensions that you may want to think about is, what different types of products that you may be positioning in front of your customers, different types of services that you offer in addition to those products. What are the problems that you're trying to solve for your customers, or conversely, what are the benefits that your product or solution solves? Are there different types of users that you could appeal to, and different calls to action that they may have? So, classic, your standard things that you want to be thinking about when you're marketing, but get creative and make sure that you've got a lot of variety. I put that image of the produce there because I think it's an important analogy, or an easy analogy. Like, you don't want to be giving RSAs different flavors of apples to work with. If you had 10 different types of apples that they're choosing from, that's really not a lot of variety. If you want it to be able to choose from apples and carrots and lettuce and celery and watermelon, to make sure that you can, really appeal most appropriately to each individual audience. Let's take a look at what that looks like in practice. So this is a report that is available to Marin users starting in the next week or so that will help understand what your assets look like today. Sylvanas talked about the importance of taking the good data that you have in place and making sure that you're not starting from scratch. You're using the data that you have. So what we do is go in and look across your account, and we roll up all of the different headlines you're using and bring in some additional data associated with that. So, how many ad groups does it show up in? What percentage of spend is it accounting for? What does the conversion rate and cost per conversion look like for those headlines? And these are the building blocks that are going to go into your RSAs. And you see a lot of different variations of, the brand here, that show up, or brand plus a year or official site, but you can also see some additional variations that are interesting, different directions to go in. So trusted software. You see keyword insertion a little bit lower on the page, easy to use and easy to install, reliable and robust. So those are all different concepts that would be great to include when you're thinking about, how do I get to this 8 to 10 headlines? There's also going to be things, and you see if you look at the number of ad groups that those are represented in, those are concepts that somebody's added over time into some of the ad groups, but they aren't very widely spread. So there's an opportunity to bring this messaging more broadly when you roll out RSAs. Let's talk a little bit more about pinning. So the idea with RSAs is you're using machine learning to fully customize the ad to meet the user's needs and context and what Google understands about them. And so by pinning headlines, you're actually constraining that machine learning to do exactly what it's designed to do. So our advice is to be careful and use pinning as sparingly as possible. There are some situations where it is necessary, and a good example of this is if you've got legal or compliance things that have to show up in the headline or have to show in a certain place, then you've got no choice but to use pinning. Try and limit that. Do it maybe for one position if you need to. If you've got brands that if there's certain brand presentation or brand language that you're forced to use and that's being pushed on you, I would advocate to your company that you should do an experiment. Try and unpin it and see if giving it full range of options actually drives better results for you, and if that's something that you're willing to live with. If you do have to use pinning, though, one final tip on that would be to make sure that you've got enough variety at every spot. So you may have to pin a certain message to a certain position, but you can pin 2 or 3 variations of that message and still give Google a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of control on how to best present that message to each individual user. All right, and final topic here is optimization tips. So a few additional tips as you're thinking about how to get started with your RSA transition. First thing is to maximize the assets in your RSAs. So don't take an existing ad, add 1 or 2 headlines in it, and call it a day. You really want to give the machine learning enough to work with in order to really deliver the best personalized ads. So make sure you've got 8, 10, 12, get all the way up to 15 ads or 15 headlines and all 4 of those descriptions in order to give it plenty of raw material to work with. Sylvanus showed some of the reporting on the individual ad elements, and one thing that you may notice is that you have some ads that are, or some assets, I should say, that are getting very low number of impressions. And it could be that those are, really poor performing assets, but it also could be that those 0 impression assets are too similar to other assets in the RSA. And so if the machine learning just sees those as equivalent assets, what they're going to do is just pick one and shift all of the inventory to that one asset and not test both. So make sure that you've got, again, enough variety or enough difference between the headlines and descriptions that you're putting in there. And if you see things getting low traffic, ask yourself, how can I make this a little bit more different than what's already there? You can remove lower performing assets, but that's not a constant pruning process that you need to do unless you're out of room. Don't worry about pulling out lower performing stuff until you've maxed out on the 15 headlines and the 4 descriptions. At that point, then start pruning away things that aren't working as well. I mentioned keyword insertion before, but definitely don't forget about that. You should have 3 to 4 headlines that have the keyword that you want to show, or leverage actual keyword insertion, dynamic keyword insertion into the ad to make sure that the user's query is still showing up in the headline of the ad. And then the last tip is don't forget about campaign extensions. So these ads are, showing up in all the same auctions that your existing ads are. They're going to get supplemented with campaign extensions, with site links and structured snippets. From the user's perspective, they're not going to see a different experience for these ad formats. So make sure that as you're thinking about the headlines and the descriptions that you're putting in there, that they're working and compatible with your campaign extensions. One final tip, I don't have it listed on here, but in thinking about your overall account structure, this doesn't require restructuring your account or reorganizing, launching new campaigns or groups or anything like that. These ads are going into your existing ad groups, and you're just adding them as a new ad within a new ad type within those ad groups. So to recap, get started. Pick a few ad groups and try it today. Make sure that you've got enough variety and then you've got enough volume for the tool to work with. Avoid pinning wherever possible, and think about, keep an eye on those and those ads and how they're performing, and look to optimize them so that you can get your best performance. You're probably not going to get this right, from the first get-go, and so make sure that you're looking at what you're doing, learning from it as you consider your migration strategy for 2019 and shifting towards RSAs. So with that, just a quick recap on Marin. Our goal is to bring search, social, and e-commerce advertising together. We help you amplify the efforts that you're putting into Google to get the most out of these new ad formats to help you deliver more customers and more revenue for your business. We want to help accelerate your growth, and our focus right now is helping our customers do this migration. So as we get into after the holidays here, we're in a freeze. We'll launch our initial support for RSAs and start helping our customers with this migration. If you're having challenges or you need support in thinking about RSAs and how to put together a strategy, we'd love to help you with that. So please reach out to us, and we can help you make the most of this exciting new format. With that, let me hand it over to Karen for another poll question.
Great. Thanks so much, Wes, and thanks, Sylvanus. We've gotten through an awful lot of information, and we are going to have some time for Q&A. So that's good news, audience, for you. And we're going to start with a question of our own, as Wes just mentioned. Now that you've heard and gotten all this great information about RSAs, we want you to put your predictive hats on and ask you, do you think RSAs will ultimately replace standard text ads? Again, we'd like you to choose one of these three choices. So your choices are, yes, definitely. Maybe you're not sure. You don't want to go out on a limb yet. Or, no, it's very unlikely. Text ads are still the way people are going to click and search, and that's how advertisers are going to spend their money. So think about what you feel about that, what the future will hold for digital marketers. And I'll remind you again that our webinar is going to be available on demand later today. I know we've given you a lot of information. We've gone pretty quickly, so if you want to watch it again, listen in, you can do that at your leisure after the webinar, a few hours after the webinar. So just make sure you keep an eye out for that. I'm going to send an email out to everyone to let you know when it's ready. So let's take a look at our results and what our predictive hats say, and I'm going to ask Sylvanus and Wes to take a look at these results with me. So we've got more than half say that RSAs will ultimately replace standard text ads. A few not sure, and very few, less than 20%, say it's unlikely. So that's good news for both Google and Marin and other advertisers out there. Any thoughts on this? Wes, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Absolutely. I think that it's interesting that there are still a number of skeptics out there. I think the dynamization of advertising is something that we're seeing across the board. So it started with shopping ads being powered off a product feed where there aren't really any keywords involved, right? There's just matching of the user's query to the products that a retailer is selling. You see a similar product with dynamic search ads where you're matching a user's query with the contents of a website. Facebook has a similar product called Dynamic Creatives to RSAs that is the same concept where you're giving headlines and creative assets, and then Facebook will assemble the ads on the fly. So I think that Marin's perspective is that this is definitely the way of the future, and that handcrafting of individual ads is something that a marketer will be doing less and less of over time. I don't think Google's going to be shutting down traditional text ads anytime soon. I wouldn't see that as a 2019 thing, but I do think that they'll be making a push to shift advertisers to it because they do believe in machine learning and they do believe that it can produce better results. It is a mindset shift for advertisers, and like I said earlier, change is always challenging and can be scary. But I think it gives us the opportunity to think really to go back instead of being Excel spreadsheet jockeys and spending a lot of time creating all these different variations. It lets us be marketers. It lets us focus on, what is the message that we're trying to send? How do we connect to our customers in a meaningful and personalized way, as opposed to just the logistics of creating lots and lots of ads and keywords.
Sylvanus, Wes hit that on the nose for you and everyone at Google?
I think Wes has a really good take on it. And he did hit on a lot of the key points I would have said. I think when you look at Google kind of across the board, you see investments in machine learning on a number of different products. And even in Google Ads, as was mentioned, we already have products such as responsive display ads, dynamic search ads, universal app campaigns that rely heavily on machine learning. And even in core parts of our system on search are heavily machine learning driven. So, I strongly believe that you'll see more commitment to machine learning, and our first jump into this is responsive search ads, especially next year. And of course, as the product manager for responsive search ads, I'm excited about it. So I think Wes had a great take on it.
Great. Good. Well, let's get into some of our audience questions. So what I'm going to do today, gentlemen, is read the question out loud. I know it's kind of hard to just listen and not see it, but we're going to try it that way today. And there'll be some questions for both Sylvanus and Wes, I can see from those that are coming in. And I'm going to try and group them together. So if we're talking about ad groups, I'll try and ask you a few questions about ad groups rather than jump around too much. So the first question I'm going to get to has to do with volume and ad volume, because that came across from a few attendees. What kind of ad volume do you need to be delivering to leverage responsive search ads? So that's an important question. Do you have to have a minimum set of volume? Can you be a small advertiser? Do you have to be an enterprise advertiser? So Sylvanus, why don't you start with that one?
Sure. We've gotten this question a couple times, and I think what we try to tend to say is that responsive search ads can work for advertisers of all sizes, but specifically, if you wanted to say, hey, where should I start? We've been recommending, hey, at least 100 impressions in a week would be a good place to start. So if I had to prioritize, I would definitely go with my higher impression ad groups. And we say if you wanted to draw a cut line somewhere, let's start with ones that have at least 100 impressions a week. Again, the more impressions, again, you get the more chances for the machine learning to learn faster. So, yeah, that's how I'd answer it.
Wes, anything to add?
No, I mean, I think at 100 impressions, that's for a lot of advertisers, that's not a super low bar. So I think it is applicable for a broad suite of advertisers, and it's going to get better and learn more over time as machine learning does, as it has more data.
All right, let's get to some questions about ad groups. Would you say these ads, meaning RSAs, are more suited for ad groups that have many different keywords versus tightly matched ad groups, or even SKAG? I'm going to assume, Sylvanus, that you know what SKAG stands for. So go ahead and answer that one.
Yeah, just for everyone listening, it's a single keyword ad group. So I'd say at a high level, in some ways it's probably better just because the more keywords, the more variety of different combinations that might match. But just remember, on top of the keyword, there's actually more. So I wouldn't say that it won't work in the maybe SKAGs or single keyword ad group or very few tightly themed keywords. So remember, we look at the context and the actual raw search, the actual way that the consumer typed in the question or the query that they were looking for. So we take that into account, the fact that the context about where that person is and the same person, as well as like characteristics about the person, maybe their previous search, what they did right before, or what audience group they're in. So I think there's a lot of signals we can use that even in the cases where you have very tightly themed keywords in an ad group, responsive search ads still can work. It just doesn't mean that I would say they won't work. They probably work even better in ones where you have lots of keywords. But still remember, it's more than just the keyword in terms of how we can decide which headlines and descriptions to show.
Wes, anything to add?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't think about this as an opportunity to get sloppy with our account structures. So this doesn't give you the green light to go in and just dump a bunch of keywords in, and then RSAs will show the right message to match to the right query. I think it's a bit more nuanced and powerful than that. If somebody's been searching for information about your competitor and you have a headline that talks about how you compare against the competition or something, that may be something that gets served up even in a single keyword ad group to a client or to a user who is focused on thinking about the competition. If they're worried about price, maybe you've got another user who is focused on price and you have a message that addresses that. Those are ways that even within a single keyword ad group, you still can get power out of this by delivering a personalized and more relevant version of your message to those users. So I would discourage people from, while I agree with Sylvanas that it may work better in broadly constructed ad groups, I would discourage people from using it as a reason to go in and just moving more towards less tightly clustered ad groups and keywords.
All right, let's move on to, we had a few questions about the balance between text ads and RSAs, which we covered in our poll question, and I think that's a topic people want to hear about. So the first question is, will RSAs be favored over normal text ads to be placed in higher positions? So Sylvanas, how about the algorithms behind this? Is there any benefit to the RSAs over text ads in terms of what Google's going to look at?
So we will not favor the text ad versus the responsive search ad in terms of which one can show in a higher position versus another. It really goes back to when we look at an ad and we're choosing which ones to serve, we're looking at, again, all the different signals we can see and which ads in that auction. Remember, all the ads go to auction and compete with other ads. And the goal is to say which of these ads is going to be most relevant and most likely to be clicked on or converted on for a particular user for that particular query. So basically, at a summary, I would say it's not that responsive search ads have any inherent advantage over text ads just because it's a responsive search ad. I think the real power comes from the content and the combinations that can be assembled that you would otherwise have to do very manually and methodically on a normal text ad. But it's not that we favor or put it at a disadvantage or at an advantage to a text ad just so that it could serve more.
All right, Wes, you know what? I'm going to add this to your part of answering that question. So we talked about, is one favored over the other? The next question was, would you suggest focusing solely on RSAs or a combination of text ads and RSAs? If it's a combination, what are some best practices for using them together? So I know you covered some best practices, Wes. Maybe you can go into a little more detail on that.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to have their existing account structures built out with the traditional text ads, and so I think for the first part of 2019, having a focus on experimenting with RSAs is probably the right approach. And by adding these RSAs to your existing ad groups, you're going to be using both naturally. They'll both show up, they'll both be competing, and it'll all be based on performance. And so from there, you'll be able to see what impact does shifting to RSAs RSAs have on your account, and how does it work with your existing ads that are there. And then again, when you create these RSAs, you're going to be pulling content from the existing creatives in a lot of cases. So, it's not going to be a radically different experience for your user. It just allows the machine learning to help, tweak and juice and get that extra performance. So as you start to test this out and you get traction with those new RSAs that you put in, you can from there kind of decide how aggressively you're going to want to shift. If it's working well and really delivering performance for you, I would say go for it and roll that out across your account. If you haven't quite figured out the right formula, if you haven't been able to get enough variety in there, or for any other reason, I'd advocate continue testing and tweaking and seeing if you can get it to work for you. And if it's not delivering a lift, then it's something that focus your attention on other areas, other ways to fine tune your account.
Okay, great. Let's get into some questions around testing. All right, we had a few over there. So when looking at combinations, Google only reports on click-through, CTR. Will Google eventually report on other metrics such as conversions, conversion rate, etc.? So, Sylvanus, do you want to try and answer that one?
Just to clarify, I think they are talking about the combination report. If so, in the combination report, we actually show impressions. So the reason we built the combination report was about transparency. The goal was not to show all the different metrics at the combination or asset level, because we actually are trying to help the advertiser up level to say the real focus should be on, is the work I'm doing in terms of adding new assets, removing assets, changing the assets, does that get my overall ad group better performance? And performance here is, do you get more clicks and conversions? And so the goal is not to focus on saying making those metrics available at the more granular level, because it's not that you can manipulate or optimize it in such a way where if you saw a combination that you saw serving more, that you say, okay, then now make that one always serve. That wasn't the goal behind responsive search ads. So I think the future, the focus is not on more metrics at the combination or asset level, but more on insights at a higher level to say, for example, which of these assets are working best for which users in different contexts, and helping marketers and advertisers understand this is really how my assets are appealing to different users.
Wes, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, the RSAs and machine learning is, again, a bit of a black box, and it's going to be impossible to tease out all of the data that you'd like to have, or how you would think about things traditionally. Our role at Marin will try and offer reports that provide as much insight as possible across how the different assets are performing. We are limited by what Google will make available, so we won't have full, down to the impression or down to the combination level reporting. But if we can help our goal will be to help advertisers understand and automatically identify if there are assets that are not performing well, or if there are assets that are performing well that may be relevant in other campaigns or ad groups that you're not using, and help you push those out to those campaigns. Those are the kind of tools that we'll partner with on Google to try and work out and help our advertisers get the most out of this. But I agree with Sylvanus that it's unlikely to have full reporting down at the combination level, down to the conversion.
All right. Wes, a couple of questions came in during your part of the presentation about, someone was asking about, you mentioned machine learning, how it adapts the ads to the user's personal query. Is that based on query history or time or the current search session? Can you explain this in more detail?
Yeah, I think this is a question that's probably better suited to Sylvanus, but at a high level, Google has a number of signals that they know about the users, and they're going to use everything that they can to provide the most relevant and informative ad. I always like to remember that the advertising, when it's relevant, is not annoying at all. If you're planning a trip to Hawaii and you start getting ads for events and restaurants in Hawaii, that's going to be thought of as useful content, and that's the high level spirit of what we're trying to do is put relevant, interesting messages to users. I'll let Savanis talk about the specifics of the type of signals that are being used in RSA personalization.
Yeah, so we don't share a full list of all the signals we use. One, because there's a number of reasons why technically, but also then the signals might change over time as things get better. The two examples we are fine sharing with is like the relevance to the keyword and the query as well as the device are two obvious signals that we use. The others, if you were curious about some of the types of signals, we have a page on our Help Center that talks about for smart bidding. You can see the variety of signals that get used there. And so you can imagine some of those signals, like that's the kinds of signals that could be available in responsive search ads. But we don't have like an exhaustive list that we will share about, this are the exact signals we're using at this time.
All right, let's see if we can get one more in here. Sylvanus, we have an attendee who was asking, it's been a few months since this was launched, and then someone else had asked about if it was still in beta. Do you have any data so far that would indicate higher performance with RSA? So maybe you can just cover that in terms of the availability.
Sure. So back in July, we announced that this is starting a beta. So we are still in beta. It's a pretty large-scale beta. In terms of availability, we have launched this to 14 languages. We just put out a release on our blog yesterday about which of those, you can see the 10 new languages. The 4 that we launched with when we first started the beta was English, French, Spanish, and German. So those ones have been widely available for several months, and the 10 new languages, you can see what they are. Those have just been more widely available since yesterday. In terms of performance, we definitely see positive performance when advertisers add a responsive search ad to their existing ad group. At this point, we're in no way saying get rid of your text ads or do anything like that. Right now, we think the focus should be on advertisers getting comfortable with what are responsive search ads, how do they work. So we just say add it to an existing ad group that already has text ads, and it can compete alongside with those. When text ads are predicted to perform better, they will serve more. When the responsive search ad is predicted to perform better, it will serve more. So again, they can compete on equal playing fields. On my slide, I had a number range that we've been showing. Again, on average, it's between 5 and 15%. So we've been saying comfortably up to 15% more clicks and conversions for that ad group just by adding the responsive search ad. So that's kind of the data that we're able to share externally. On the announcement we put out yesterday, we actually have one testimonial, specific use case. One customer you can read about who actually put out saying how much uplift they saw by adding responsive search ads. So I think that's the only available data that we're externally sharing right now.
All right, Wes, any anecdotal data you want to share on that?
Yeah, we've seen mixed results across our client base. Some didn't see a lot of impact, and maybe those are in smaller volume ad groups. But we have definitely seen some positive results from it, which is why we're optimistic about the future of this ad format. We're working on a couple of case studies that we'll be looking to publish in the new year around RSAs that'll have more specifics about performance.
All right. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. So I want to thank Sylvanus and Wes for a very informative and timely presentation. And I want to thank you, audience, for your great questions. Now, I know we had a few that we didn't get to, but I don't want you to worry. We're going to pass all of the questions that came in today to our friends at Marin Software for follow-up. I do want to give a special thank you to Marin Software for sponsoring our webinar today. You can visit them, as you see here, at www.marinsoftware.com. So that's all for our broadcast today. We look forward to seeing you next time, right here at Digital Marketing.